I'm probably going to be the most coarse person sitting on this panel today. I actually thought I'd be sitting out there. So I do thank you for the invitation to sit up here. And I've been looking at this and studying this since the day I first heard about it, which really wasn't all that long ago, when it became an up-and-coming thing in my community, and it started springing up here, there, and everywhere all around me, and the complaints from all of my constituents as to what in the world is going on. We have a rain tax. I looked at it and I thought, wow, this could very well be much like what DEP instituted a few years ago with denitrification and the Chesapeake Bay. And nobody in this room, nobody in my district wants dirty air or dirty water. We'll get that out right away. But we spent billions upon billions upon billions of dollars here in Pennsylvania rebuilding sewer systems for denitrification systems. And not long ago, we had a hearing and Chesapeake Bay testified in Harrisburg, and we moved the needle a whopping less than 4%. So in other words, I look at it as, did we get a bang for our buck? And in that case, no, probably because we didn't think it through thoroughly. We didn't go to the public. DEP did not come to the public and say, let's have these hearings just like this with leaders and with the communities all across the state where it would be, where they would be affected, and find out what they need, what they can do. Instead, we're just going to roll it out and here's what you got to do. And MS4 seems like it's the denitrification all over again. Here's what you got to do. The big boys upstairs at the Fed said, here's your guidelines, now you implement it. So what we have here is environmental engineers' dream come true in every municipality that is affected by MS4s. Because in all reality, this room is probably sitting full of township supervisors, borough managers, and constituents, and they aren't experts in environmental control. So they got to take the word of the engineer, and in most cases, their township engineer is not an environmental engineer, he's a township engineer. And he's got to figure out what they've got to do in order to meet these mandates. So like someone just said a few seconds ago, are we doing the minimum? Are we doing the maximum? Who knows? All I know is that I got a fire company paying $60,000 a year for this. I've got churches paying money. I've got hospitals paying money. Everybody's paying money, and guess who pays? The taxpayer. And are we getting the bang for the buck? And nobody knows. And then when I asked the question during that hearing, where did you take the water samples from? In order to determine, because if you want a reduction, and I read in here somewhere it said 10%, I've heard other places say 20% reduction we need. Well, if you never took a water sample to get a starting place, how do you know when you've reached your reduction? How do you know when you've ended? How do you know when you've met that goal? Again, something that should have been talked about and communicated with the communities who are ever going to be affected. That was never done. As a matter of fact, my township, and I sit in on a lot of their meetings, we begged DEP to come and explain it to us over and over and over again, and we could never get it to happen. And we're not that far from Harrisburg. All that being said is we got to do better. To take a sample is a snapshot in time. So if I was running my township, I would order my engineer not to take any sample until we've not had rain for at least a month and a half, where the water is low, it's sitting still, not much moving, and no sediment stirred up. Would DEP accept that for a sample, a starting place?
Starting places for some of this is based on water quality monitoring within the Chesapeake Bay, not necessarily from one spot below the on a very dry day and a very dry month.
But sir, you narrowed it down to townships and boroughs. Mm-hmm. Those are spots.
Right, and it was the 10% is based on you model, you do the calculations, again based on not necessarily a microburst but you're basing it on the average rainfall for the average period of time, and you run your models based on that, and then you get the load allocation, how much you think it's going to come off of all of that property.
So everything that my township and all these people's township, based on what we think, not actual evidence or proof
Well,
or
no,
data.
we'll review, and that's just it. There's two different, when we set some of this, there's multiple ways to address a single problem. And so in our permit, if, as I mentioned in the testimony, there's an average way of doing it, and there's also the way that you, the sort of the way that you described it, where the department will then take what you've looked at and review it.
But if they've never taken any actual samples or come out to view the township to see what BMPs are already in place, how would they possibly know?
They'll be looking at the information that you would have provided as to where the BMPs are, and then review it based on that.
Okay, thank you. And just very quickly,
All right.
Melissa, we have tens of thousands of miles of state road in Pennsylvania. That's a pretty good guess. I would say every single mile of every single one of those roads have grease, sediment, dirt, salt from trucks, cars, whatever, falling on them. How is doing a quarter-mile stream enhancement or putting in a rain garden in one spot addressing all the other places that you're having rainwater wash that stuff off the road?
I believe the biggest reduction we need to achieve, especially the Chesapeake's a great example, is the sediment itself. And that's a little bit different than you're asking, but that seems to be the most critical piece of the loading right now. And actually the amount of sediment itself coming off the road is actually relatively low. And that's where working with the partnering with the municipalities for the stream restorations, those other type of projects, actually is a big benefit, because that's when we can really help contribute to that sediment reduction. Because coming straight off the road, it is a challenge. It is a challenge to get that one-to-one. That's why we're saying the biggest bang for our buck is to actually look at those stream restorations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.